Hey everybody, how's it going? For today's unique presentation, let's take a detailed look at the very rare and quite unique 1970 Ford Torino King Cobra Prototype. And this is going to be a detailed, in-depth review of the King Cobra. We'll start it up, show the engine, get an exhaust clip, and go over the performance data, as well as show you a bunch of the unique aspects of the interior, as well as exterior. And before we begin, I'd like to extend a big thanks and special shout out to RK Motors Charlotte, located in Charlotte, North Carolina, for providing the Torino King Cobra featured in today's in-depth review. For more information on any of their other super sweet inventory, check out rkmotorscharlotte.com. And so, without further ado, let's go and start her up, let her run. The original exterior color is known as vermilion orange, featuring a full black vinyl interior. Ford really went all out with giving the prototype a functional interior that's almost indistinguishable from your run-of-the-mill Torino. In fact, it's a much more finished product than you would typically find in a prototype. Power steering was included and fed through a 3-spoke thin-rimmed steering wheel, as were power brakes with discs in the front and drums in the rear. Putting the highly modified Boss 429 700 horsepower to the pavement is a close-ratio top-loader 4-speed manual with classic Hertz shifter, 9-inch rear end, and 3.50 gears. So let's go and check out the exterior, shall we? The NASCAR Aero Wars were in full effect towards the late 1960s, spurring some of the most outrageous and innovative cars to ever see the race circuit. When you're in a heated battle of horsepower, even the slightest edge above the rest could make the difference between a win and a loss. That edge in this case is aerodynamics. Ford and Chrysler duked it out for a number of years to create the perfect combination of design efficiency and speed. The Ford Torino King Cobra concept would have been Ford's answer to the radical new Mopar offerings. Unfortunately, due to design complications, funds, and impending regulations, it was a prototype that never saw its intended light, destined to be an epic memory and competitive excess. The biggest problem with the cars during this time was aerodynamics. With everyone today putting an emphasis on drag coefficients, there weren't many cars during that time that would be efficient enough to really be considered aerodynamic, aside from purpose-built cars like the Ford GT40. Luckily, in the late 1960s, the Ford Torino Talladega and Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2 represented the beginning of an all-new direction in racing. With sleek bodies, rounded edges, and fastback profiles, their performance advantage was their wind-cutting abilities, leading to higher speeds and greater control with superior downforce. With this advantage, Chrysler Group struggled to compete, not necessarily from lack of performance, but the fact that the Dodge Charger 500 at the time had the aerodynamics of a brick, and couldn't measure up with the sleek profiles of its blue oval rivals. In 1969, Dodge went out on a limb and developed one of the most memorable NASCAR creations in history, the Charger Daytona. Following that, in 1970, Plymouth came out with their own winged car dubbed the Roadrunner Superbird. As outrageous as they were for the time, it became the edge Chrysler needed to bring the heat back to Ford's doorstep. One of NASCAR's most important requirements at the time was that the manufacturer also had to sell a production variant to the public. The Daytona set many records that carried over to the Superbird. It was the first race car to break the 200-mile-an-hour barrier and was also the first vehicle to be completely designed using wind tunnels and computer analysis. With a drag coefficient of just 0.28, it cut through the wind better than many of today's automobiles. With the Mopar twins starting to edge out in front of Ford, something had to change if they were to stay competitive. When the all-new Torino was introduced for 1970, it was longer, wider, and slightly heavier than its predecessor. On the other hand, it was reported that the extra weight gave the car more traction, while the larger dimensions allowed fitment of all new, high-horsepower engines. The problem was the rear glass and roofline, which proved to be less aerodynamic than its predecessor. Therefore, a wind-cheating prototype was developed known as the King Cobra. Like the Mopar offerings, the King Cobra was designed with aerodynamics in mind. Starting with the 1970 Torino Cobra, the front end received a complete makeover. Unlike the Mopar cars, the nose cone isn't a bolt-on piece. With a scoop, sloping hood, one-piece fenders, and removable headlamp covers, the design looks more refined. Unlike the standard Torino, the KC only receives 2 headlamps. The slender, wraparound bumper is lower and positions itself above the breather in the bottom fascia. The turn signals sit between the headlamps in a recessed housing. Everything else from the doors back is your typical Torino, aside from subtle styling changes, King Cobra graphics, and the black GT-inspired hood and side stripes. This car you see here is one of 2 known original running prototypes. The other is located in a car museum in Sevierville, Tennessee. There's also rumors of a third, while Mercury was actually working on their own revamped Cyclone Spoiler 2. Like the Daytona and Superbird, the car is huge. At 17.5 feet long, it's a sight to see in person. One of the King Cobra's biggest faults was instability at high speeds with too much lift and not enough downforce despite the nose cone. This was largely due to the shape of the new rear window. Therefore, this King Cobra features a prototype convex shape said to improve stability. The rest of the car's car-like glass is also stamped with prototype development tooling, not to specification. There were likely a few factors as to why the King Cobra never saw production. While stability likely could have been fixed with a Mopar-like rear wing, new NASCAR production regulations and severe budget costs at the time likely played a bigger role. But it's a great look at what could have been. Who knows what it would have led to next? The King Cobra featured a set of 14-inch polished Magnum 500 wheels wrapped in 235/60 tires in front and two 55/50 tires in the rear. As we touched on earlier, power brakes were fitted, while discs in the front and drums in the rear. Underneath, the suspension consists of AA arms, while staggered Monroe-matic shocks and heavy-duty leaf springs bring up the rear. While not on the car at this moment, the NASCAR spec springs could be fitted with an even lower ride height. Underneath, long tube headers channel that amazing sound through a huge dual exhaust system passed through IMCO mufflers at the back. Not much is available as far as performance and detailed specifications other than the fact that this King Cobra was the only one that featured the potent Boss 429 big block V8, or 7 liters in modern times, modified to produce 700 horsepower while running on race gas and a single 4-barrel Holley carburetor. It also features aluminum heads and an aluminum dual-plane intake, while the block is finished in a classic blue paint. It's the only 4-speed prototype built, and one of 2 King Cobras delivered to Budmore Engineering after the development project ceased. Unlike many prototypes and concepts introduced over the years, the King Cobra was basically a finished car pretty much. The interior was almost exactly what you would find in a Fairlane or a Torino. Carpeted floors, vinyl padded seats, door panels, and more. Faux wood trim in a spear-headed fashion coming across the middle section, manual windows, manual mirrors, and a carpeted lower portion with your door handle in the middle of the armrest. While the King Cobra definitely isn't a luxury car, it still has plenty of chrome and bright work typical of cars found in this era. The nice thing about the interior is that it is relatively comfortable. It is a minimalistic layout, very simplistic overall, so you don't have a lot of extra things distracting you from the overall driving experience, like you don't have a floor console or bucket seats or anything like that, but you can fit 3 people in the front if you really wanted to. Down below, the seats are adjustable in the front, both forward and backward, and you do have headrests, which is a nice feature. Wrapped in vinyl, both front and rear, aluminum door sill entry guards, as well as aluminum accented pedals. All of your switch gear up top like we talked about earlier, and a padded dash pad extending the length of the vehicle.
So let's go ahead and see what she sounds. Gaining access to the back seat is also simple. Just pull up on that little lever, and the seat flips up and tilts over, making ingress and egress a whole lot easier for backseat passengers. And just like the front, a full vinyl bench seat provides plenty of soft comfort. There's also a single ashtray on the driver's side portion of the seat, but not on the passenger side. So let's go and check out the rest of the vehicle, shall we? padded dash also extends to the right-hand portion like I showed you earlier. Unique Cobra badging, as well as a locking glove box down below.
While the Ford Torino King Cobra never made it to the NASCAR circuit, it really is an amazing example of the excess the manufacturers were going to help achieve maximum aerodynamics. A super cool concept with an overall more refined design, packing an unbelievable amount of power in a very simplistic muscle car layout.
Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed this unique look at the very rare 1970 Ford Torino King Cobra. Be sure to stay tuned next time, there's a lot more where that came from. Take care everybody.